The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome to Leadership Podcast. It is yet another edition of the Big Issue. And of course, I would like to apologize for that slight delay. It was due to unforeseen circumstances beyond our control. And without taking much of your time, our in-house analysts are already here seated. Together, we are going to discuss the big issue of the day. Am I right to have Chibuzo Okaibe?
Thank you very much.
And of course, we have Mark Itibo,
Thank you very much.
a veteran analyst,
Thank you.
economic analyst.
Welcome, our listeners.
And for the big issue of the day, President Buhari sack of 2 ministers and the issues at stake. President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday sacked 2 of his ministers over what many have described as poor performance in their assigned duties. The affected persons are the Ministers of Agriculture and Rural Development, Mohammed Nanono, and the Minister of State for Works and Housing, Engineer Abubakar D. Aliyu. And of course, the Minister of Environment, Dr. Mohammed, was redeployed to take over the Minister of Agriculture's job, Nanono.
Yes.
And the Minister of State for Works and Housing was redeployed to take over the Minister of Power. Well, this is the first time we are seeing the president taking this action. In 6 years, Mark, what do you think would have prompted the president to take an action that is very unlikely of him and he has not done for the past 6 years? This is unprecedented.
Well, I think the president is waking up to the public expected responsibility. Because we cannot say he has not been doing something, he has been doing something, but expectedly, by public estimation, he has not been doing what he has just done. That's why the sacking of the 2 ministers appears to be an unusual holding of the big stick. Yes, but it shows again that there is hope for Nigeria and Nigerians. It shows that the president has, at least for once, listened to the plight of Nigeria, because the 2 ministries affected or involved, the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of Agriculture, are very, very critical to survival and diversification of the Nigerian economy. Because it depends on the performance of these ministries for us to know what the direction of the economy will be, if you ask me. Power is one of the biggest sectors. And of course, agriculture employs very much, creates many jobs, and it creates much wealth for Nigeria and Nigerians. You know what we could have been making if the 2 sectors were working up to average. So the replacement of the ministers is long overdue. But I'm able to say that it is not only these 2 ministers that the Nigerians were expected to be affected. Nigerians were expecting more. And that is what I expect the president also do. Yes. Because these are clear. The 3 critical aspects of the economy have to have good supervisors, good managers. Once you have good managers, good supervisors in the steering of these ministries, you can be sure that at least something tangible will be achieved before the end of this administration.
Well, Chibuzo, you heard what Mark has said. During his first term, Buhari didn't sack any minister up till this time in the second term. People are taking his ministerial appointment as if it is a civil service job where workers are rarely sacked. What would have informed this first time decision of the president?
as Mark rightly pointed out, perhaps it's a reflection of the government's willingness to yield to public discourse around how he runs his government on the one hand, and to ensure that things are tweaked to give us better results. However, I don't know whether this is connected in any way to the recent comments by former, no, not the serving rather, um National Security Advisor, who after the strategic meeting they had about security came out and made references to president's concern about not having a field legacy. Perhaps, and it's a big one, it's a big conjecture, whether there's a connection between, a fear of not having a good legacy and whether that is just restricted to security issue, it's another matter. But I think on the broad scale, one would expect that the president will be thinking about his legacy at this point. That said, I wonder how much this change, what the kind of impact that this um, sack would have. Because it is one thing to have this sets of people in your cabinet and for them to perform, in a way that is on, because to manage the agri sector and the power sector especially requires some revolutionary thinking. And permit me, so far, I don't think this government has demonstrated that enough. We are still at where there's a struggle, to beat the 5,000 mark when it comes to, power and I mean the 5,000 megawatt mark. Whereas with regards to agriculture, I am yet to see any, real big out of the box thing, happen in the last 6 years. In fact, at the point under the last administration, the agri sector used to be the most vibrant ministry. But today, I don't think that is the case, and that has not happened just in the last couple of years, but the whole of this administration. So it is quite clear. Perhaps they can, explain that away by saying they were distracted so much by the security crisis, and as such, it has became an issue. Also, could it also be that the politics of 2023 is also distracting them from, doing what they ought to do? Because as it stands now, all we keep hearing every day is this person defects that and that person defects here. We barely hear news about what new projects are being commissioned or all of that. But overall, it's a good move if that would wake up other ministers and get them to really focus on what they want to be doing.
Well,
Time will tell.
the president did not actually give clear indication of the reasons why the two ministers were sacked, apart from what the statement to that effect say about subjecting ministers' performance to independent and critical assessment and review. But Nigerians have speculated that it could be because they were not be able to carry out some government policies in their ministry effectively. Mark,
Yes.
what do you have to say in addition to what
Yes,
Aliyu has just said?
I just want to further substantiate what he has said. Look at, there are so many indications that there are very many weak areas in our economy. Take for instance the issue of inflation, cost of food today. The president or anybody should be worried at the alarming rate of cost of agriculturally produced products. Agricultural products today in our markets are very high. If the other time we were talking about onions, how scarce it was, how expensive. Then you talk about sweet potato and the rest of them. Talk about beans. A mudu of beans today in our local market is about 1,000 naira, if not more. In Abuja here where we stay, is about 1,000 naira, 1,150 naira, 1,050 naira. You understand? The price of food alone is something to talk about. And then we'll talk about again, the president, I believe, must be worried about the food security. Because as it is, if care is not taken by this time next year, Nigeria will be having the big issue of food insecurity. What that means is that we may not be able to feed ourselves or even get where to buy. Because like they say in my local palace, they say there is hunger only when there is nowhere to buy, not even the money to buy. You understand? Because the way we are going, there is already shortage in the food supply chain orchestrated by this insecurity. And the only interventions we see in that particular agricultural sector, for instance, is the one that is being done by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And you wonder what the former minister has done since the last how many years. He illustrated and wasted time. He illustrated over the intervention of the second mandate of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that's the Development Finance. And you ask, what was he doing? The Anchor Borrowers program that is now the pride child of this government is the childbirth and nurturing of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And so you ask, what has he done? Then we'll talk about the power sector.
Yes, but before we go to the power sector, man, in addition to what you've just said about the agri sector, see, the thinking of most Nigerians outside there is that the Minister of Agri was not able to implement Buhari's policy on grazing routes and grazing areas, which is a policy that the president has been pushing despite stiff opposition. You understand, across the country. What do you have to say about that?
Well, if that is on the speculative side of it, I wouldn't still expect the president to be so determined about achieving that. The grazing route you are talking about, it is not, the minister is not. I will not buy into that. I will not adopt that kind of speculation. Because yes, it's possible. I will not say it's not. I can't sit down here and say it is true or it's not true. It's possible. But the fact is that you would wonder, why would the president be so glued to implementing that? Although it's in the way of the government, because they seem to be so interested in those kind of things that affect cattle and cattle breeders. You understand? But I still don't want to believe that a responsible and responsive government will, because you are not being able to achieve an anti-people, an unpopular idea. So because of that, you are pulling the minister away. That is far lower than the bigger issues that are affecting Nigerians today. The issue of food insecurity, the issue of inflation, the issue of what do you call? Talk about the job cuts in the agriculture employs far more than any other sector. Today, the ICT sector that is growing faster in the economy does not employ up to agriculture. My friends, my relatives, my late parents, all of them, they were farmers. You could go to farm, I remember in those days, and just get groundnut, a basin of groundnut, and you come and sell, you will make 200 naira, and that can feed the family for a day. And that is nowhere, because this issue of headers farmers crisis, this headers terrorism, and the rest of them has driven everybody away from the farm. So I wouldn't expect that the president will be, or will, because he wants to achieve something that is anti-people, go ahead and remove the minister. So that's why I still stand on the fact that the president is so much disturbed by other factors as inflation and other things that I mentioned.
Yeah.
For him to have taken, more so that the statement by Mr. Femi Adesina said that the president, after critical review, discovered some weak areas. Do you understand? So that is why I so much hold on to the fact that these people, because of their obvious poor performance, they were displaced from office.
Well, before we'll now go to the power sector. Let's hear what Chibuzo will have to say to this, the thinking by this school of thought, that it was because the agri minister was unable to implement the policy of grazing routes and grazing areas. That was why he was shown the way out. Do you agree?
Let me join Mark. It has to be substantiated, beyond just conjecture. But again, for people to be making such insinuations, it only reflects how a passive government, the quality of conjecture they make about you is a reflection of how they see you. So I think that should be the problem of the government, to ensure that such insinuations are not don't become mainstream. But again, government itself has said they had to let them go because we're not pulling their weight. So I think we should anchor it on that because it also carries a lot of substance that indeed those two sectors are not living up to expectations. Now, for me, whether or not you blame it solely on the ministers is a different matter. Because by the time all of this begins to unravel, one would also think about what role were they supposed to play and what policy direction and what kind of support they get in the securities for the tasks they were given. So the opposition is already saying, oh, they are already insinuating, if I may use that expression, that it was just a safe face measure. They were already tumbling and they needed to do something quick to push back, a certain
regain the confidence of Nigeria.
And that it does not verify whatever failings they've had in the past. But time will tell, like I said. What next steps they take, we give a clear indication as to what they are thinking beyond just sacking these ministers.
Well, let's just quickly take a short break and do some publicity and announcement. Don't turn off that dial and don't go offline. We'll be back in a short while. Welcome back. We are still on the big issue in Leadership Podcast. And of course, I hope you're actually fulfilling the vibes out there. And of course, as we appeal again, as a very, very regular listener, you send in your contribution by way of comments to help set the agenda of this program. And as we go on, we expect that you start sending them, and as they come, we are going to read them out to the public and then allow the public to think, to have an understanding the way you two are thinking. Well, Mark, let's go now to in the power sector. Nigerians are saying that despite the huge amount of money spent in that very sector, nothing significant has shown. Of course, of recent you've seen the collapse of the national grid, the blackout, and available data indicate that electricity supply, according to reports from all-time daily peak generation of 5,420.30 megawatts on August 18, 2019, few days to Saleh's appointment. The generation dropped to a peak of 4,701.40 megawatts on August 31, 2021. And of course, the same Mamman said over the past year, $6.150 billion, about $2.373 had been secured for infrastructure, right development, and earmarked for critical projects. What do you think? That particular action taken by the president in relieving the minister of his job, it makes sense here.
Yes, let me let me tell you something. The issue of power sector in Nigeria, I will best describe it as the shame of a nation, because over the years, year in year out, this has been the major, the key problem of Nigeria's economic growth. Fix the power sector, leave Nigerians to grow, and Nigerians will grow this economy and grow at their individual pace higher, even faster than the projections. Now, we talk about investment in that sector. We know that the distribution side has been privatized, the generation side has been privatized, and the Nigerian government is now holding on to the transmission side. If the distribution side has been privatized, and these distribution companies of Nigeria, I think they have, is it 9 or 11 of them? If they are not performing up to expectation, is there no caveat in our agreement with when I mean Nigeria's the federal government agreement with these discos on what you must achieve for you to remain in business? How come that side, every time you hear the gencos are saying that the generation is not, what they generate is not being picked in full, and power is not stored. When you generate power, if it is not picked within 24 hours, it is wasted. And now we'll talk about the transmission sector. The transmission sector, we have enough transmission but the distribution side is where you have problem of distribution. That is infrastructural problems, where you don't have good transformers, you don't have good connecting cables and poles. And you ask, what are we still doing with these discos that are not performing? Should we leave Nigeria's economy to grow down, to grow negative, at the expense of Nigerian people, just to fulfill the admiration and aspirations or whatever gain of this discourse? So the minister, you look, let me tell you, they say you supervise when you are believed to have a universal knowledge or a superior knowledge. Because you don't supervise. For you to be a supervisor, it means that you would have had enough knowledge on how to provide a solution to this problem. That minister, Mamman, appears not to be prepared for that position in the first place. But he was engaged based on whatever sentiments.
Maybe for political
based on whatever sentiments.
reason.
So if you employ for a government that is ready to solve the power sector problem, you give key indicators, key performance indicators. Those KPIs are the things that you set for yourself, possibly in 6 months. You say, okay, let us see what you can achieve, because it is a critical sector that should be dear to every president. Staying there since 2019 for these 2 years, you can imagine what they did in the first place. They appointed a lawyer, Fashola. For 4 years, he was the minister of power. And you tell me that there's no need because it is administrative. But I tell you,
one will wonder that a senior advocate of Nigeria,
was a supervising minister for power.
Then how do you make power work?
Then they will tell you,
blowing legal jargons into the transformers.
And what they make you understand is that there's no need because it is administrative. But I tell you that there's need because if you tell me there's no need, I tell you that there's need because the issue of professionalization,
yes,
and has something good to
and
do.
as a good supervisor, you must have knowledge.
You must know. You don't supervise what you don't know.
Of what you are supervising.
Yes. You don't supervise what you don't know. It is what you know. As an editor in this business of journalism, for you to rise to the position of an editor, no publisher will just pick you and go and dump you there as an editor. Yes, you pronounce a good a bad spelling to a good image. So what was the need for bringing a lawyer to head that sector in the first place? And now you want to bring somebody that obviously was not ready. For 2 years, the guy wasted time again, that is a counterpart. And like I said earlier, these are not just the two people. We have several other ministries. If you will write, if you will write to that, I wouldn't mind. Even if not calling names, I wouldn't mind mentioning some areas that the president also needs to wake up. So the issue of the power sector, for instance, we have been experiencing several times and hours of collapse of the power of the national grid. And you ask, how come? How are we seeing elsewhere, outside of this country? What does that mean for our businesses? What does that mean for our economy? What does that mean for Nigerians? What does that mean for our children?
Yes, what you just said, Mark, has just drawn my attention. Another is something again that has come here. Many people are saying that they are hoping that this is not a one-off shake-up of the cabinet. That it should be a continuous exercise to put the ministers on their toes. Before we go back to Mark, Chibuzo, what would you say about this kind of thinking?
Well, the expectation is that this sack shake things up a little. How far that would be is a different matter. And the president himself said he's going to sack more people, or he's going to shake up the place a bit more. But like I said, we have barely how many years or months to the end of this administration. And you can be sure that between now and by the time this administration winds up, you're going to see much more politics than policy or governance. That is almost a given if the tradition of our administrative system is anything to go by. So, at the risk of sounding pessimistic, I'm not too optimistic that anything special is going to happen. If it will, it might just be merely marginal and might be cosmetic. I stand the risk of being corrected on that. It might be cosmetic in light of the 2023 elections. So that said, we hope to see what other set of ministers will go and get perhaps a clearer indication of how badly they have performed. It's not enough to just throw a blanket and say, they couldn't pull their weight. Give us specifics. And perhaps they should also give us the targets they set for them. Because it might be unfair to just say, he didn't perform well, and then you hack him off, or you hack whoever you're hacking off, because you think he didn't perform well. There might just be, sacrificial lambs, if you will, in the space of political engagement.
Well, of course, but just like you rightly said, I think I will agree with you. Because the people...
But that does not mean their performance, is anything to go by. Because it's obvious.
Yes, but what
obvious is that nothing significant has happened. However,
sorry to cut you short. Okay, the People's Democratic Party said it was out of political expediency and an effective attempt to cover for President Muhammadu Buhari's failure in office. And then they say it was also investigating the real reason behind it, because it could be as a result of corruption. Because Buhari's language towards corruption is that they will quietly ease you out when you have found one thing in terms of corruption.
Well, until the PDP comes up with its own investigation and gives us something concrete.
And of course, it happened to Adeoshu.
Exactly.
When she was accused of forging her.
No, of course, definitely. But it has become convenient for PDP to do these things now because it's a political system.
Yeah.
However, it's unfortunate that there are no other strong parties to make such claims, because the history of power and the corruption in the power system didn't start under this administration. If there is a corruption allegation attached to why he's been the current former minister has been laid off. Exactly. So the power sector has been a theater of sleaze, So, and it spans these two parties. So, well, we hope to see what PDP brings up as evidence that the reason behind this sack or the sacks tied to corruption. In the absence of that, the immediate thought for anybody looking from the outside looking in will be that, okay, the PDP wants to politicize this and make some political gains out of this. Whether or not what they are saying is, substantial or not, is a different matter.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me just put this as a shocker because I say some of the ministers watching us out there now might be shocked when we say you are all journalists. You have been following trends in the country. Are there some ministries which you think their ministers should sit up because of glaring deficiencies in those ministries?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Just mention a few.
Of course. First and foremost, the Ministry of FCT. In the Ministry of FCT, the Minister of FCT needs to wake up because Abuja is turning to another place. The lights, the street lights are not working. The crime rate is very high. Everything, even the traffic. Traffic in Abuja now is like is more than traffic in in Lagos State. That's one. As a matter of fact, the Ministry of Humanitarian Resources also needs to wake up because we have humanitarian crisis in our hands, on our hands. And then also the Ministry of
Well, Chukwuzo, the president has since keyed into the open government initiative, which means they want to run a government that is transparent. Unfortunately, ordinary Nigerians do not have access to the presidency to make their views known to the president because if they do, perhaps Buhari would sack all the ministers by now. Don't you think the president should create an avenue where he can listen to the ordinary Nigerians who can tell them the truth about certain performance and their observation about what the ministers are doing?
I don't think the president should complain about, or there should be a concern about the president not having access to what Nigerians think. It is not the place of, in that sense, the way I see it, it's not the place of the Nigerians to keep making an attempt to make the government the header. A responsive government should put itself in a position where it goes out to get the views of Nigerians. It happens in other cities, in other climes. They conduct polls per time to gauge the feelings and gauge the performance index of their policies. It helps to guide how they see. Policy is not a one track issue. There are timelines, there are periods for review. And the only way you can get to gauge whether your policy is making the right kind of impact or not is when you put out the process of getting feedback. Now, when you get feedback, it helps to tweak areas you think, we are not doing so much. And the only way you can really have that kind of feedback is if you make a conscious effort to get the pulse of the people who you want to make these programs for. That said, there is really concern about the time frame they have will be enough to do anything really substantial, particularly if the political climate or the political fever, the 2023 fever, which appears to be more infectious than COVID at the moment, is not taken care of. As long as that heavy fever continues to blow within the APC and the PDP, you can be sure that little attention will be paid to real governance issues. And so it will just be politics all the way.
Well, that is the much we can take for today's edition of the big issue. I would like to thank my in-house analyst here, Chimuzo, and Mark. It was a wonderful job. And of course, viewer, don't forget to still drop your comment on our Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram. And of course, join us tomorrow, same time, for another edition of the big issue. Have a wonderful evening.